we yam komotwetwe enye interview se wani je ho a omoden se obehye amawmia bi enye bi ahwe se wenya de wani je ho na metufo se obegya ahwe na yede de wani je ho ni bi ba watumi ahwe fa comment bra yenkin kan ni na emfama Mariam fi se komo ebetwetwe enyumakui eni kura yasen
True grateful so there. Start sembi animo. O council sima na ben.
Tap na Sunday. No e-levy wahala.
With Diaspora Insurance, your peace of mind is guaranteed.
Rapid Courier, just shop, we deliver. Enjoy.
Original Buffroot Puff Mix. One bite is not enough.
Malata African market mu King Kong.
Every day is a Black Friday. Yeah!
Alright, Abusian for Sabre Bemo Aquaba Babia Obia. We a live coverage of my Ghana economy, you know. Kwaba Edo Aba UPSA Ray Osha Womo Auditorium Kesiapa University of Professional Studies Accra NDC and Penning for said here Uhunu Womo members of Parliament P Ewaha Sansona former ministers P and so Ewaha Osha Donwa Akasimano Mienu Simamienu na nonson abo nonson ebo ya na chese shenimu se the former president John Dramani Mahama ebeba inside her na as to say on a beshasi and also be beshasi and yentumi enchre ni nyina no said ye o my Ghana yensika sem aye enim se kwasieda o mampani na nado danko akufuado ameka say one na soafo ewo nhyiamu kase bi mu a wo mo hwe kwan a wo betumi afa so atoto niema na kwasieda no wa ba address nation no no announcement no eba ene before then na announcement in so ewo ho say John Dramani Mahama ene obekasa ede afa o my Ghana economy no eho enti consider the announcement de bebre mo live me hunu Elvis free ankra me hunu former ministers ni pi wo mu nyina atena se a ye hwe ni mu say o mampani dada John Dramani Mahama be remu any moment akasima baako Muntaka Mubarak and Uhunu say Oti Oho Shani Batakari no. No actually who former chief of staff Julius Zebra and so Eshe one corner and afe metutu many Abraham Uhunu woman along the line so yene ebedin komo but ansana no yemfa adwum to a ekoso no kakra. Sabre Uhunu a microphone John Dramani Mahama edin ebo asye meaning sir he's going to be the only speaker and saying that we can't tell and very soon no obewremu non so no abo pepepe and yenhwe how he's ushered in Nafe Jumedie no Ashasi. And in Tia Mwakwaba, back in camera comments, and so Ebi, Abra Yagusia, na some side interviews, and so at the amount no Efa or my Ghana economy, a home como, and ne Yedi. Say na we asore na wahage ne yonko kakra. Okay, no more church no. Okay, very soon omampani dada ebe remu na fe ode ne nsemu a owo efa economy ho no ede aba. Okay, Abra, sorry, that just say Oman Dada John Dramani Mahama and Sabre Ebrason say Obeura Auditorium ha. All right, and Safin was joining. Okay, then Oman Dada John Dramani Mahama and who say Sabre and Lodina Mahama. And I want to say, all call YJ Nikikino, about Julius Zebra and Champe.
Please take your seats.
All right, then the program no Shasia and no.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. On behalf of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama and his beautiful wife, Mrs. Lordina Mahama, the National Democratic Congress, and the NDC minority in Parliament, I welcome you to the UPSA Auditorium for a presentation by President John Dramani Mahama on building the Ghana we want. It is obvious this is not the Ghana we wish for. Ghana, yes, papa, mebuana. Mebuana, Mentiniyo, Mebuana. The pain of the economic mismanagement and the people who are struggling are looking up to us. The economy is biting, is really, really biting, and is biting very hard. In fact, the system is so hot that even Ojam and his people are suffering more than us in opposition. Mebwana. Importers are what? Suffering. Market women are what? Suffering. Buyers are what? And drivers are what? Petrol mutumito ana. Mpacho petrol mutumito ana. There's a popular in a can. It says that okonfoboni sikron say oyedeng or timupi. Inti country broke, country no broke. Yenya yedeng yetimupi. Inti this evening, we want to listen to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. The people of Ghana appreciated your leadership. The people of Ghana have really, really missed leadership. A young man asked me yesterday to tell you, His Excellency, that he has added visionary to your titles. After calling you infrastructure king, he wants to add that you are a leader. Indeed, what a sweet vindication. You have really been vindicated. So, visionary John Mahama, Ghana is waiting to hear from you tonight. You have provoked fellow Ghanaians to say that he's going to speak to the nation on Sunday. So I'm sure he has his pen and paper tonight. He will copy from you, and then on Sunday, we will hear what he will say. Don't do this without saying a word of prayer. Let me call the MP who is in charge of where we are. The Honorable Sosu will say the opening prayer for us. Thank you very much, Honorable.
Please, shall we rise and pray? We pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, we thank you for this evening. We give you glory, we give you honor, and we give you praise. Your word declares that righteousness exalts a nation, and sin is a reproach. When wicked and vindictive people are in charge of a nation, the people suffer. The people are miserable. Dear Lord, our current experiences are real testimony of the people in power today. Father, Ghana is looking up to you for a redemption. And we know, Lord, you redeem people using vessels. Tonight, the vessel that you have prepared to redeem Ghana from this quagmire, we pray that you will endow him with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, that he will deliver to soothe the misery of your people. Tonight, O Lord, we pray that may your angels take charge over this auditorium. We come against every work of darkness in the mighty name of Jesus. And we pray, O Lord, that by your power, by your grace, by your mercy, may you redeem this country in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Member of Parliament for the Medina constituency. Thank you. We are very grateful. And then you have put us in the spirit. If you're watching us on TV or listening to us on radio, we are live on various radio and TV stations across the country. We are live on Metro TV, Original TV, Original FM, Joy FM, Power FM, Radio XYZ, Class FM, Accra FM, CTV, TV XYZ, Wazer TV, and your favorite Loud Silence TV. You can also follow the conversation online with hashtag John Mahama Live or hashtag JM Speaks on the Economy. There's another hashtag also that says Save Ghana Now. So all these networks are available. You can tune in now. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to pave the way for His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, let's welcome the Member of Parliament for Ejumaku Enyaneshim and Minority Spokesperson for the Finance Committee, Dr. Ato Forson. Thank you very much.
We Jumedi fa Oman Ghana in Sikasem ho enkontabu and Oman Dada John Dramani Mahama Ebekasa Ede Afaho.
Good evening. We are all going through the worst form of economic crisis in our lifetime. My duty today or this evening is to show how we got here, where we are going, obviously what occasioned the reason why we are where we are, and the consequences of the economic crisis we are going through. To start with, I have titled my presentation today, Get Ready for a Crude and Painful Haircut, the Consequences of Economic Mismanagement. Colleagues, we are all aware that the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, in inherited total public debt of about 120 billion Ghana cedis, representing approximately 55.6% of GDP. Indeed, we have also heard the World Bank in their latest prediction that Ghana's public debt will be 104.7% of GDP by the end of the year 2022. This obviously means that Ghana's public debt in nominal terms will be 522 billion by the end of the year 2022. In fact, this translates to the fact that the NPP administration within a period of 6 years has added 400 billion Ghana cedis to our public debt, just in 6 years, with very little to show for. This also means that they have accumulated 50% of today's GDP in fresh debt. It is sad to note that if you look at today's public debt stock, the MPP alone had accumulated 80% of today's public debt, indicating that they are the largest in terms of the accumulation of public debt since Kwame Nkrumah. This government has successfully driven our dear country into the ditch by making our debt highly unsustainable to a point of no return. Ghana has been made poorer under this administration. Cocoa Board has accumulated over 14 billion Ghana cedis in fresh debt. ECG owes IPPs, independent power producers, over 12 billion Ghana cedis. Almost every single state-owned enterprise is insolvent. The situation is not only scary, but very worrying. Currently, the government owes contractors and suppliers about 100 billion Ghana cedis. And I will show to you how much they owe at various places. The government has approximately 70 billion Ghana cedis at the Ministry of Finance waiting for payment. Again, Get Fund owed contractors about 3 billion Ghana cedis. I'm also aware that contractors are owed in excess of 2 billion Ghana cedis at the Ghana Road Fund. It will surprise you to know that about 10 billion Ghana cedis, representing a colossal amount, is waiting for payment at various MMDAs. Cocoa Board owe contractors and other suppliers in excess of 3 billion Ghana cedis. Ghana will need to take a very bitter pill to address this cancer of national embarrassment and undeserving albatross arising from economic mismanagement. If this administration had heeded the wise counsel from the NDC, some civil society organizations, as well as well-meaning Ghanaians, I'm aware that we wouldn't be where we are today. This ineptitude and intransigence has occasioned the loss of confidence in the Ghanaian economy by the investor community. Businesses, as we speak, are moving to Ivory Coast and other neighboring countries. It will also surprise you to know that companies are shutting down and layoffs are becoming daily routine, with frequent devastating downgrades by rating agencies. The spreads representing the interest rate of Ghana's sovereign bonds have widened significantly in the international capital market and the domestic market. Today, if Ghana is supposed to go to the bond market, international bond market, we will end up borrowing dollar at 36%. Today, if you go to the domestic market, government is struggling to borrow at 30%. This year alone, as a result of the deteriorating economic condition, rating agencies have downgraded Ghana's credit worthiness to an unprecedented manner, a level that has never happened in the history of Ghana. Fitch had to downgrade Ghana from B- to CC with a negative outlook. Standard & Poor had to downgrade Ghana again from B- to CCC+ with an outlook, clearly meaning that they are going to downgrade us even further. Moody's also had to downgrade Ghana from B-, B3 to CAA2, with outlook also under review, clearly indicating that in the coming months, if things does not improve, they will downgrade us even further. Our unsustainable debt levels have led credit rating agencies to describe our dear country, Ghana, as a country where debt default is imminent, with very little prospect for recovery. Unfortunately, these rating agencies are likely to downgrade our dear country, Ghana, further to D in the coming months because of our obvious pending debt restructuring. But let me say that it is true that the public debt is the main problem. Excessive borrowing leading to public debt overhang and the loss of access to the international capital market is the elephant in the room. Ghana's public debt overhang has reached an unprecedented level and is trending upwards. Even though the public debt levels have risen across some countries, the capacity to live with such debt levels varies considerably from country to country. The ability to repay the debt is certainly not the same. So it is wrong for people to compare the fact that some countries has debt to GDP in excess of 100%. The important point is that the ability to carry the debt differs from country to country. The load I can carry is certainly different from the load that my son can carry. So you cannot make that kind of analysis. It is sad to know that the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia government refused to accept that Ghana's economic woes are deeply rooted in the accumulation of the public debt to an unsustainable levels. The following analysis confirms that the unsustainable debt levels is indeed the problem. Let me say that Ghana's total domestic debt as at December 2020 had increased to 278% of domestic revenue, almost 3 times the size of domestic revenue, and is expected to worsen by the end of the year 2022, this year. This situation is far worse than the HIPIC days. In fact, HIPIC numbers looks better than today's numbers. It is also surprising to note that nearly 50% of the entire domestic revenue, including market tolls, the fees and charges at the OPD, all of them put together, goes towards debt servicing. This crowds out critical expenditure in the year 2020. And I will also project that by the end of this year, we will end up needing 55% of the entire domestic revenue to deliver the needed debt servicing that we require. But it is also important to understand that domestic revenue is different from tax revenue. Domestic revenue is far larger, and the amount of domestic revenue that is not available to individuals for the central government. And so there is the need to consider the revenues that is available for central government. So oftentimes in my analysis, I use tax revenue. Interest payment as a percentage to tax revenue increased from 55% at the end of the year 2022. And it will surprise you to know that by the end of the year 2022, this year, interest payment will be approximately 55% of tax revenue. I've also got the opportunity to look at what actually occasioned Ghana to be here. That government reckless fiscal behavior and creative accounting is indeed the reason why we are where we are. Creative accounting in the sense that government decided to hide critical debt numbers and national statistics from Parliament and to the world, obviously to create wrong impression that they are doing well. Unfortunately, they are not doing well. This is what comes to all of us eyes. Debt level is indeed the government reckless fiscal behavior, and creative accounting is the reason for these huge debt levels. The rise in debt service cost has mostly been due to huge fiscal and large budget financing needs since the year 2018, when the fiscal indiscipline actually started. And let me say that huge fiscal deficit simply means that the government overspent more than its revenue in excess of what is acceptable. And then as a result, they had to borrow excessively to finance this huge fiscal deficit. As a result of this reckless borrowing, the government policy of one program, one loan. That's how I call it. Debt service cost is now exceeding 8% of GDP. This is a government that believes that every problem in the economy, they will have to go and borrow money to fund it. If you go to the president and say, Mr. President, I'm sick, I'm having a headache, he says, go and see the finance for a bond. They believe that everything has to be debt. Unfortunately, they have lost the way. The rising debt service cost has crowded out most critical expenditures, such as education and health. Ghana has reached a point where about 90% of our tax revenue is used to service debt, making it virtually impossible to pay for statutory funds from the same tax revenue. I've often talked about the need for us to understand what has happened over the years and to understand that that is the main reason why where we are. For example, in the year 2018, the MPP administration had informed Parliament and to the Ghanaian public that they borrowed 11.6 billion Ghana cedis to finance a fiscal deficit of 3.9% of GDP. But indeed, that was false. They actually borrowed 21.4 billion Ghana cedis to finance a fiscal deficit of 7.1% of GDP. So they hid from Parliament an amount of 10 billion Ghana cedis. And the Ghanaian people did not know that they borrowed in excess of what they had reported. Again, in the year 2019, they had again reported to Parliament that they borrowed 4.8% of GDP, representing 16.8 billion Ghana cedis. But again, that was false. They actually borrowed 25.2 billion Ghana cedis. Clearly, they hid from the Ghanaian people approximately 8.2 billion Ghana cedis. Then comes the year 2020, the year of elections. They ran a fiscal deficit of 11% according to them. They claimed they borrowed 44.9 billion Ghana cedis, largely for election year expenditure. But unfortunately, that wasn't the truth. The truth was they borrowed 67.3 billion Ghana cedis to finance government expenditure during the election year. That is the reason why we are where we are. They ended up running a fiscal deficit of 17.2%, mother of all fiscal deficit. This is the largest fiscal deficit since Kwame Nkrumah went to Equatorial Guinea. And it is also important to understand that in the year 2021, after winning the elections, one would have thought that they would have changed the narrative. But unfortunately, they failed to change the narrative. What they did again was to inform Parliament and to the public that they had run a fiscal deficit of 9.2% of GDP. Obviously, it means that they borrowed 42.3 billion Ghana cedis to finance fiscal deficit. But the actual numbers showed that they borrowed 56.9 billion Ghana cedis. So if you track the fiscal part, clearly, all of us will see the fact that this government had run a fiscal deficit in excess of approximately 42% of GDP. 42% of GDP in 4 years. This is the kind of fiscal deficit countries do in over 4 decades. In some countries will do it at least 10 years. What they have done is that they have taken the space that 4 governments will end up needing. So even if a new government comes into office, if you don't do anything, you come and you sit there and you cannot do anything because they have covered all the space with very little to show. Apart from toilets, they have nothing to show. Ladies and gentlemen, there is also the need to examine Ghana's ability, or rather inability, to repay this debt that we are talking about. In the first 6 months of the year 2020, this year, according to the data that they presented to us in Parliament, Ghana's total tax revenue was 30 billion Ghana cedis. 30 billion Ghana cedis. During the same period, debt service obligation was 26.1 billion, representing 87% of tax revenue, leaving only 3.9 billion to run the entire nation for the period. So what it simply means is that they collected 30 billion in tax revenue. They ended up using 26.1 billion just to service our debt, obviously because of the way they have increased the debt. government spent 17 billion on compensation of employees, representing wages and salaries of government workers alone for the same period. This simply means that the government had to borrow to pay for wages and salaries between January and June 2022. Government half-year tax revenue obviously shows that 30 billion was paid, but this was certainly not enough to pay for both compensation and debt service of 43 billion. So you collect 30 billion, but debt service and compensation was 43 billion. So clearly, you will have to borrow to top up before you can pay your staff, like teachers and nurses, and before you can service your debt. And you could see that this is the situation that we are in. But let me say that this is largely because of the huge debt service obligation as a result of reckless borrowing. It should be noted that out of the 30 billion tax revenue, 10 billion Ghana cedis is already earmarked for statutory funds such as the constitutional DACF, this is Assembly Common Fund, National Health Insurance Levy, Get Fund, Road Fund, and others. And it obviously means that they did not pay for it. And I've tried to show this graph. And what this chart shows is that for the first one, you can see the one in orange representing your revenue. And then two items in yellow representing your wages and salary of government workers, and obviously the fact that you have to service your debt. So you have 30 billion against 43 billion. How do you do it? You have to borrow more to pay your debt. So even the debt itself, you have to borrow money before you can service it. But remember that this 30 billion has 10 billion Ghana cedis for statutory funds. One of them is constitutional, District Assembly Common Fund. The others are legal, and you have to pay them, and the money is not obviously available. So if you are to be judicious with what the laws require, you have to put 10 billion aside. And putting 10 billion aside will mean that the only tax revenue that is available for the nation is 20 billion Ghana cedis. So out of the 20 billion Ghana cedis, you had to borrow additional 23.1 billion Ghana cedis before you can service your debt and before you can pay your wages and salaries. In fact, in simple put, the 20 billion is not enough to service your debt. So you had to borrow more to service your debt. So no wonder today as we speak, District Assembly releases are not going, Get Fund is not being paid, National Health Insurance is dying, and everyone else is dying because the money is simply not available. Colleagues, Ghana has indeed inevitably reached a point where the interest of the creditor and the public has collided, and this is important. Creditors, including treasury bill holders, bond holders, term loan holders, government contractors, and etc., definitely want to be repaid according to the terms of their finance agreement or contract. On the other hand, the public, you and I, want pensions to be paid, health care to be provided, roads to be maintained, children to be educated. But the truth is, Ghana cannot currently afford to repay its debt obligation according to the finance agreement and provide public goods at the same time. That is the stark reality. Ghana is simply insolvent. In other words, bankrupt. That is the sad reality. But it's also important for us to understand and to diagnose the problem as it is. The problem we face now has to do with insolvency. It has nothing to do with liquidity. And we should understand that we have an insolvency situation at hand, and there's the need for us to confront it head on. And to our senior citizens here, you recall that under Achampon, we had to contend with Yentia. Today, we have seen Achampon reincarnate form called Yentumintia. That is where we are. So you have Achampon under President Achampon days Yentia, and we are going to have under President Akufo-Addo Yentumintia. That's the worst form of Achampon regime. But this is possible, a clear-cut distinction between insolvency and liquidity. Yentua and Yentumintua is possible. since borrowing cost and market access depends on the word insolvency. Ghana is currently suffering from what I call sovereign insolvency stress, SIS, which means that we are facing the following: loss of market access, high and rising borrowing costs, rapid depreciation of the Ghanaian cedi, high inflation, default staring at Ghana, and there's low fiscal space. Our debt situation has been unsustainable since 2021. Ghana is currently insolvent or bankrupt and cannot repay its debt. The situation is not, and I repeat, not liquidity. But you see, when you, as I said, you are confronted with a default staring at you, oftentimes people take this lightly. But we cannot take this lightly. You will need to understand the kind of default that you will have to contend with, whether yentuya or yentumintuya. The two are not the same. One is liquidity and one has to do with insolvency. But let me say, and each one has different medicines. So you cannot use medicine A to treat ailment B. It should go according to plan. First, if the default has to do with soft default, in other words, liquidity, or yentuya and achampo, it's something that creditors are quite friendly with. But when the default situation that you have to contend with has to do with insolvency, in other words, the kind of default that creditors are unfriendly with, yentumintuya, where we are now, then you will have to look at it and understand and take the right medication. First of all, if a country has an ability to pay, but obviously facing short-term financing needs, and the fact that because they are facing short-term financing needs, there's no willingness to pay, that country is facing liquidity problems. If the debt is due today, they come to you and inform you that because of problem A and B, I cannot pay the debt today, so I will pay next year. And then the second point is they do what we call coupon reduction. Coupon simple means interest rate. So they come to you and say to you that the interest rate of 15%, I can't pay because of the problem that I'm in. So I will want you to accept, say, 5%. What this simple means is that, and if you track country to country, those who have gone through this, it means that the investor will lose approximately 20% of his or her investment. 20%. But that is not what we are in. Our situation is far worse. And as I said, our situation is yentumintuya. And if you have to contend with yentumintuya hard default, the first thing you need to understand is the level of your debt. We all know, and you can see there, we all know that our debt situation is such that we will have to look at the debt levels. The debt levels, as we are talking about today, everyone has confirmed that Ghana's debt is unsustainable. In fact, our debt is highly unsustainable and is in debt distress. This means that we have lost the ability to pay. And as I did the ability to pay analysis, and you saw it clearly, that Ghana does not have the ability to pay, then it means you have solvency problem. What countries have done over the years is that when you are confronted with a situation like that of insolvency problem, there's something we call principal haircut. And that is why I said get ready for a crude and painful haircut. The principal haircut means that the value of your bond itself, government will call you and tell you that you need to mean to. And so you have to accept a haircut, a barber, to shave you off. Even if you have no hair, like I don't have, you are going to get it. What this means is that, and if you look at country to country, an average NPV loss to the investor will be about 60%. 60% of loss is going to be you have to contend with. But there are some good news and the bad news. There are typically 5 ways to deal with unsustainable debt situation. And every country has to go through this if you are confronted with unsustainable debt. You either grow out of the debt, which this administration unfortunately had not been able to do. They inherited a lot of real sector investment that brought about a lot of growth in the year 2017 when they took office. Unfortunately, they had not invested in real sector activities, and as a result, Ghana cannot grow out of its debt. We gave them Sankofa, and for that matter, you agree with me that in 2017, growth actually came up heavily. Revenue came up heavily, and that is why in my analysis, I have said that 2017 numbers was good. It was good because of the work His Excellency John Mahama and his administration did, and not because of what they did. So clearly, they have lost the way. So that opportunity is gone. We can also inflate the debt away. As to whether Ghana can inflate it away, I have my doubt. We've lost that opportunity because if you are to look at the quantum of our debt, it's largely, we have 50% or so owned to foreigners, and it's in various currencies. So whether there's inflation or not, that debt is not worthless. That debt is still strong because it's in foreign currency and inflation will not affect it. So you can't grow out of that. We can evade it through financial repression. And that simple means that even though inflation is going through about 40%, probably you can 1%. But is that possible in the case of Ghana? Ghana cannot do that. So we have only 2 options left. Repay it through fiscal adjustment and restructure it. So I will spend my time on this last 2 and conclude. How do we repay fiscal adjustment? Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, Ghana's rising debt burden confront our government with difficult choices, especially as our debt distress trend is upwards. The government will have to deliver 8% of GDP in primary surpluses 4 consecutive years to lower the debt to GDP from 100% to 70% if government decide to repay its debt through fiscal adjustment. This will mean that a fiscal adjustment of about 8% of GDP, and simple put, we will have to increase taxes, say 4% of GDP, and cut expenditure of about 4% of GDP. But I doubt that at this critical time of our national life, hardships at these unprecedented levels, worst form of hardship in our lifetime, whether we can increase additional taxes. I doubt. Expenditure cut of 4% of GDP, yes, there is room. And I'm sure in the course of it, we can discuss that. Additional taxes, in my view, will be too painful. It will increase the suffering of the people of Ghana, and Ghana government cannot accept this. I think that this is not an option. These measures may be punitive and may lead to socio-political instability. Obviously, because the current economic hardship is just too much. If the government had listened to us in the year 2021, when my good self, the Honorable Haruna, the Honorable Muntaka, and our colleagues came here in UPSA and had the opportunity to invite the minister responsible for finance and to inform them that Ghana's debt has reached an unsustainable limit, so they should start it again. The government decided to ignore us. In fact, Ghana could have remedied the situation, but unfortunately, they refused to act. Now the fiscal crisis has escalated. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that there is a way to deal with this. At the time that we had informed them, clearly our debt levels was 80%. All what they should have done was to do a primary surplus of 2.7% of GDP. If they had done primary surplus of 2.7% of GDP, and this was easy to do, if you constrain the president lifestyle alone and cut the Office of Government Machinery budget alone, you could have done that. But unfortunately, they decided to go on overdrive, on expenditure, overdrive, high speed, Formula One. And that has landed us to this level. Today, our debt has moved from 80% of GDP in 2021 January to approximately 100%. The World Bank has said that you will need it's about approximately 105% of GDP. But as patriotic as I am, I've always said it's 100%. And 100% will mean that to bring it down to 70%, you will need to do 8% of primary surplus every year for 4 years. So colleagues, Ghana should brace for serious austerity in the coming years for the next 4 years or more. The mess they have created, they said that they will leave office and their shadow will follow any government that comes after them. Has started talking about debt restructuring, obviously as a tool to deal with the unsustainable debt levels. And this will be my last topic to discuss, then I will sit. Debt restructuring, simple means Ghana cannot meet its debt service obligation. In other words, it has to renegotiate its debt terms, repayment terms. The announcement of debt restructuring will mean that Ghana has defaulted in its debt service obligation and will have to renegotiate its debt. International credit rating agencies are most likely to downgrade Ghana to D in the coming months, as soon as the government officially announces debt restructuring. The process of debt restructuring is similar to HIPIC. However, HIPIC targeted bilateral and multilateral loans. Loans that you owe to country, and multilateral to international banks like World Bank, IMF, Africa Development Bank, Asia Development Banks. But debt restructuring will target commercial debt, debt that is owned to private individuals and private banks, and state banks that are privately owned. Examples of commercial lenders and possible debt restructuring envelope may include. So the following are the people that should expect a haircut. Domestic bond holders, get ready. Foreign bond holders, get ready. Term loans from local banks, get ready. Term loans from foreign banks, ready. ESLA bond holders, get ready. Get Fandache bond holders, get ready. Cocoa Bills bond holders, get ready. Bilateral loans will be affected. Export credit loans will be affected. Government contractors and suppliers, including IPPs, will also be affected. So this is where we are. Commercial lenders and others will have to accept a reduction in interest and principal payment, or risk default or non-payment. So the question is, you accept the haircut no matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter whether you get ugly, because obviously if you don't accept it, then there will be non-payment. So I would prefer to be ugly than not to get my money at all, because I will starve to die. But it's important for us to draw some distinctions between domestic and external debt restructuring. And I've said that one of the biggest dilemmas in sovereign debt restructuring is the extent to which the burden should be borne by holders of the debt instrument, governed by domestic and foreign laws. And that is what we call domestic and foreign debt restructuring. Restructuring domestic debt is like a surgery. You only do it if you must, and you avoid it if it might do more harm than good. It's a dangerous tool. Restructuring the local debt must be thought through very well. Imagine the consequences of haircut on the face value of your interest on your bond. Face value and interest of your bond. Imagine waking up one early morning only to be told that your 1 million Ghana cedis in government bond has suddenly become 700,000 Ghana cedis, to the extent that government has taken 300 million of your money. Imagine that. Imagine waking up one early morning only to be told that your 25% interest on your investment is suddenly going to become 15% at a time inflation is almost 40%. Simple put, you are going to get real interest rate on your returns. Terrible times. Imagine an individual losing so much of his lifetime savings that has been invested in government bonds and the so-called risk-free. Imagine. Pension funds will suffer in a drop in value. Tier 2 and Tier 3 pension payout will drop from already low levels. Tier 1, SNET, reserves will drop in value. SNET capacity to pay pensions will certainly suffer. Insurance companies' reserves will fall with implication for benefit payment, unfortunately. Local banks, other deposit-taking institutions, savings and loans, rural banks, credit unions in the villages will suffer because they hold their reserves in local bonds. Restructuring domestic debt may undermine the health of the banking system, since capital adequacy will depend on the soundness of the balance sheet of the bank. To be honest with you, a lot of trouble is looming. Just get ready. Get ready. Colleagues, the burden will be mostly borne by banks. The ones that will suffer most after banks will be firms and companies. Individuals will also suffer. Foreign investors will follow. Bank of Ghana, private pension scheme will also suffer. Rural banks are going to suffer. Insurance companies will suffer. And others, I don't know who they are, they will also suffer. State pensions will also suffer. So to the MC, Obi, it's not only drivers that are suffering, everybody will suffer under this economy. We estimate that Ghana will require a debt relief of about 45% of GDP, in excess of 200 billion Ghana cedis, to make our debt sustainable. Simply put, Ghana will have to ask you and I, Sami, to give free money to the government of 200 billion Ghana cedis before our debt will become unsustainable. To make our debt sustainable, we need to reduce our debt to GDP from over 100% to 55% of GDP. And this is required before we can get an IMF board approval, not staff level. So even if you get staff level approval, until you make your debt sustainable by doing all what it takes to get debt relief of 200 billion Ghana cedis and to bring it to 55% of GDP, the board will not sit and you will not get a dime from the IMF. And I repeat, you will not get a dime from the IMF. There are obviously consequences to debt restructuring. Ghana will be the first sub-Saharan African country to restructure its commercial debt with a huge reputational damage. And Nkrumah's Ghana is now going to suffer reputational damage, the Black Star of Africa. Within 20 years, Ghana is moving from heavily indebted poor country, HIPIC, to sovereign insolvency stress. So the problem now is no longer HIPIC. We are in SIS, sovereign insolvency stress. Economic growth will be the biggest casualty in the next 3 years. Now I'll move to recommendation and conclude. Colleagues, the future of our dear country is at stake, and there's the need to not to leave our future and livelihood only to the ruling government. We all have to get involved. We have that sacred responsibility to the people of Ghana. We cannot sit unconcerned and wait for IMF to save our dear country from collapse. There are economic tools that can be deployed to save our country from collapse. We in the minority recommend a set of policy options for government, and we demand urgent consideration. This country belongs to all of us. Number 1, curbing inflation should be the top priority. Ghana does not want inflation to be entrenched. We need to confront inflation now before it becomes too late. Number 2, the Bank of Ghana need to anchor inflation expectation. Immediately, they should stop the printing of currency, otherwise known as monetary financing to finance government expenditure. That should stop immediately after this press statement. We also say that to stem the rapid depreciation of our cedi, the Bank of Ghana may have to call for an emergency monetary policy committee meeting and consider the need to possibly hike, even if it is for the purpose of signaling that somebody is in charge. Today, it looks as if nobody is in charge. Forget about what they are doing, meeting forex bureaus and black market people. Go and do the heavy duty. That is what the investors are looking at. Government must prioritize and rationalize expenditure by cutting all unnecessary and frivolous expenditures. Imposing taxes at this time will hurt Ghanaians and undermine economic growth and economic recovery that we all seek. However, there is an urgent need to improve compliance in tax collection. I now conclude. The haircut will hit you directly or indirectly. It doesn't matter if you have no hair. It will be crude and painful, extremely painful. Don't celebrate if you are bald-headed like me. The crude haircut will still find you and punish you. Mr. President, please be aware that a Mickey Mouse form of debt restructuring will hurt Ghana big time. Your debt restructuring must not target domestic creditors. It will destroy us. Ghana is in a deep mess because the managers of the economy fail to act. For them, everything is about the next election. They never accept responsibility. They always say, it wasn't me. It was the guy behind the tree. They live in another planet. They do not appreciate what the IMF will require from them, let alone to start the digging. The ineptitude is just unbelievable. The Ghanaian economy is indeed suffering from sovereign insolvency stress and stagflation coupled with acute debt overhang syndrome. Our disease is called sardosis. Honestly, we are in a big mess. If the economic hardship and the haircut find you, remember, it is as a result of the ineptitude of Alhaji Bawumia and his economic management team. There's a Chinese proverb that says, he who blames others has a long way to go on his journey. He who blames himself is halfway there, and he who blames no one has arrived. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can we do that again? Thank you very much, Dr. Atoforsen. Please take your seats. Are you not scared? That's scary already. Dr. Atoforsen is Minority Spokesperson on Finance. Thank you very much. That was very competent and a presentation about the consequences of our economic mismanagement. And I'm sure that our opponents have been all talk, but no action. With multiple crises piling up on top of each other, they are still absolutely clueless, and I mean clueless, about what to do next. The good news is that the visionary John Mahama is willing to share some ideas with them. I pray they are picking up their notepads and their pens right about now. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the presumptive presidential candidate of the National Democratic Congress for the 2024 elections and the next president of the Republic of Ghana, the visionary John Dramani Mahama.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my sister Obovia. Honorable leader of the NDC group in Parliament. Our parliamentary colleagues, party colleagues, my wife, Lodina. Let me begin by thanking Dr. Keselato Forsen for that very impressive and very concise and accurate presentation on the dire economic situation that we find ourselves in as a country. And I say good evening to everyone who is joining us from wherever you are in the world, and especially to those of you who've made time to join us here at the UPSA auditorium as we talk about building the Ghana we want. Dr. Atuforsen's presentation has laid bare the stark and objective yet depressing reality of our country today, how we got here, and the dreadful consequences that it has spawned. I'll begin by talking about Ghana's economic situation today, just to recap some of the things that he has talked about. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last few years, our economy has lurched from crisis to crisis, ultimately resulting in the most debilitating living conditions in several decades. In the space of 10 months, our currency, the Ghana cedi, has depreciated by over 62% against the US dollar, which is the highest level we have ever reached in recent memory. Our public debt is projected to hover around 522 billion Ghana cedis by the close of this year, with a corresponding debt to GDP ratio of above 100%. Indeed, as Ato said, the World Bank puts it at 105%, 104%. The debt service obligations rising from this is monstrous, and it's making it impossible to provide financing for almost all sectors of the economy. The wage bill has gone up due to unbridled recruitment into all sectors of the public service, resulting from a poor capacity of the private sector to mop up the teeming youth graduating from all levels of our educational system. Worse still, Ghana has been classified as a country with the highest likelihood of debt default, which reflects the multiple downgrades that we have suffered recently by international credit agencies. As it stands, we remain firmly shut out of the international bond market. Inflation is almost hitting 40% and is set to even rise higher. Amidst all the contestations about the credibility of the method that is applied for determining inflation, some finance and economic experts believe that the reported inflation numbers, as with other economic indices, are worse than the published narratives. Ghana is on record as having the highest food inflation in the world at 122%, notwithstanding the much touted but grossly mismanaged Planting for Food and Jobs program. We're grappling with treasury bill rates of about 30% as local investors in our financial instruments suffer huge risks associated with lending to government. We're also experiencing massive reverse capital flows, with investors losing confidence in our economy and pulling out their resources in droves. It is estimated that as much as $2 billion have been taken out of our economy by investors who fear the West since the beginning of this crisis. Cote d'Ivoire and other neighboring countries have become the latest operational destination for many of these international investors, while others have pulled out completely from Ghana and West Africa. These are not just abstract numbers or vague data. They offer a bird's eye view of the state of our economy and translate into our everyday lives and our everyday struggles and suffering. They underscore our reality and the devastation millions of Ghanaians' households are facing and going through today. Ladies and gentlemen, the daily price increases, unending fuel price adjustments, ever-rising inflation, a fast depreciating currency, corruption, arrogant and insensitive leadership, and the waste of scarce resources have all combined to make life simply unbearable for the generality of Ghanaians. Prices of items including everyday medication, salt, gari, and cooking oil are constantly on the rise. If you do not buy an item at a particular point in time, you are likely to find that the price has significantly increased a few hours later when you go back to the shop. The mortgage market is collapsing and is threatening the financial plans of many Ghanaian households. Mothers suffer heartbreak each day because they cannot afford to feed the children like they used to. Countless young people with enormous potential are struggling to pursue their lifelong dreams because of financial problems. Small entrepreneurs are struggling to break even and are suffering to keep their businesses open against great odds. This is not just an installment in cyclical hardship, and we should not pretend that it is. Investments have been lost, businesses have been destroyed, the pharmaceutical sector threatens to increase prices further and are threatening to reintroduce the obnoxious cash and carry system. People have been struck by sickness and are unable to seek medical attention due to prohibitive costs, and regrettably some of them have paid the ultimate price. The standard of living, purchasing power, life savings, and quality of life of ordinary Ghanaians is depreciating by the day. Many are terrified that tomorrow may be worse as they struggle with uncertainty of our current situation. The signs of this crisis have been there since 2018, when alarming increases in our public debt levels and huge expenditure overruns became apparent. The NDC did not keep quiet. When it became obvious that we were heading for the ditch, we spoke up. We advised government. We made suggestions. I even asked government to desist from the creative accounting through which the finance minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, was selective in presenting budget data and thereby creating a picture that was rosy but was far removed from reality. All these fell on deaf ears. Government became ever more brazen and reckless and moved mismanagement of this economy to dizzying heights in the run-up to the 2020 elections, amidst boastful claims that they were the best managers of the economy. Immediately after the elections, it became clear that we had been thrown into a bottomless pit of debt round our necks, staggering budget deficits, and a rapidly deteriorating fiscal position. The looming disaster at the time required an urgent response. And even as the crisis deepened, earlier this year, we in NDC besieged government with many prescriptions, which are articulated in the Ghana at the Crossroads speech in May this year. And I urge government to seek multilateral assistance urgently. Among others, I also called on President Akufo-Addo to expeditiously convene a national dialogue on the economy, at which the best and brightest minds of our nation would be brought together to huddle and formulate a robust response to the challenges confronting us. I guess that is too late now. I re-echo demands by Ghanaians that the finance minister and the chair of the economic management team, who have been primarily responsible for this economic catastrophe, should be relieved of their positions to breed confidence among stakeholders and offer the economy a new lease of life. I asked the president to deploy some of the arsenals from the presidential toolkit and reshuffle his government to inject innovation and freshness of thinking into the running of the country. I also ask that the President address the nation to inform the public about the specific steps that he was intending to take to turn the condition around. This address was meant to calm the anxiety of the investor community and rally Ghanaians behind any such effort that he was willing to take. Regrettably, the President dug in and failed to do any of these suggestions. Let me note that since this event was advertised last weekend, I have been made aware that the President intends to address the nation sometime over this weekend. It is my prayer that his words would strike the right chords in the hearts of Ghanaians. Since my speech in May, the situation has spiraled out of control and the effects have been calamitous for all of us. There is a temptation to say, "I told you so," and that temptation is very strong. But we do not believe that this is the time for vainglorious pursuit of vindication, and neither is there room for gloating over the current predicament. But even now, as Ghanaians continue to suffer, there is a desperate attempt to shift blame. In almost robotic fashion, governments and its hirelings recite the same verse in unison, that we are in this perilous situation only because of COVID-19 and the Russian-Ukraine war. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. In fact, because of COVID-19, the government received more than 6 billion in windfall from both domestic and external sources. But for the deep hole in our finances and the reckless election 2020 expenditure, this should have been sufficient to protect Ghanaians against the COVID disease and promote post-pandemic recovery. There has been a desperate attempt at political equalization by propagandists and supporters of this government, claiming that all political parties are the same, subtly suggesting and attempting to create the impression that no other person could have done better in these circumstances, or that all political parties in Ghana cannot be differentiated ideologically. For the avoidance of doubt, we in the NDC will not have dared been as reckless, nor would we have been allowed to be as irresponsible in the handling of the public purse and the nation's resources as the NPP has done. We would not have been as reckless, and even society would never have allowed us to do some of the things that they have done. We've had our own set of challenges in government, but nothing we did or the outcome thereof has come anywhere near close to the disaster unfolding before our eyes today. To be clear, we're in this mess because an untouchable finance minister, relying on his data bank workers and neglecting the advice of seasoned experts at the finance ministry, has been left to run this economy into the ground. We're in this mess because the so-called solid economic management team over the last several years, has been unable to call the president's cousin to order when he embarked on a reckless borrowing spree, when he embarked on indiscriminate closure of indigenous banks and financial institutions, and when he embarked on creative economic presentation of statistics to make our situation look rosier than the reality. We're in this mess because we have a president who fails to take responsibility and has instead left the nation on autopilot in the hands of bungling ministers who he describes as excellent. Last December, the president is on record as having said, "The present economic mess is not my fault." Refuses to accept responsibility. For emphasis, the biggest blame for the current tragic situation in which we find ourselves lies with the very people charged with managing the country, and not with the pandemic, not with any war in any country, as has been unprofessionally posited. And Ghana has been treated as an experimental playground or a family heirloom. And I regret to say this was all avoidable. Things could have been different, and I've remained very convinced that they could have been different. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to restate what I have said over the years. We are ever ready and willing to share pragmatic steps that will help put our nation back on track. Ideally, in situations like this, backroom channels of communications should exist between the ruling party and the opposition to allow for exchange of views on important matters of national interest to the benefit of Ghanaians. Unfortunately, that has not been the case under this government, for which reason we in NDC are compelled on almost all occasions to engage the people of Ghana directly on some of the things we believe ought to be done to mitigate the untold suffering of our people and get our economy back on track. Even though government has requested for an IMF program, the lateness of the decision and the extent of economic decay means that an early approval of a fund program could prove elusive. It may take a couple of more months before an agreement is reached on a program between Ghana and the fund. In the meantime, there's the need to stem the rapid decline in the economy and reduce the unbearable hardships Ghanaians are going through. It is for this reason that I intend today to dwell more on solutions, as the state of the economy and the current fallouts are very well known to all of us. We have already put out an 11-point proposal that could have arrested the decline before we got to this critical point. Many of these proposals were outlined in my Ghana at the Crossroads speech in June and are still relevant and can be implemented even though belatedly to help address the problems we face. Many months after government reluctantly decided to request an IMF program, it has failed to coordinate and communicate any credible homegrown plan for consideration by the fund and Ghanaians at large. When we approached the fund for a program in 2015, we did so only after putting together a robust homegrown program, which the IMF adopted almost in its entirety, save for a few minor alterations. ladies and gentlemen, the immediate causes of this economic disaster we face are the unacceptably high public debt occasioned by a reckless borrowing spree and our exceptionally large budget deficits arising out of over-expenditure, as Dr. Atuforsen said. These two problems, debts and deficits, have undermined the confidence in our economy and created very serious solvency problems for government. This has set up us on a vicious cycle of debts and even more debt. Because as he explained, we have to borrow to even pay debt. So you borrow to pay your debt. And that continues to become a vicious cycle of debt accumulation. Tackling these twin challenges would mark the beginning of the much needed recovery. We know that some discussions are reported to have been initiated between governments and stakeholders on a domestic debt restructuring plan as part of the preconditions for securing an IMF program. This simply means that after mismanaging the economy and creating this crisis, Ghanaians and others who have invested their hard-earned money in government bonds and other instruments or executed contracts and supply programs awaiting payment will be asked to forfeit a part of their interest due them and a significant portion of the principal when it falls due or arrears that are owed to them. This is a very difficult and most unfair and unjust proposition. It is not for innocent people, investors and business owners to lose their investment when those who took the decisions and whose incompetence and mismanagement have brought us to this situation are not only still at post, but are being praised and protected by the president. The president must not only replace his finance minister, he must also reconstitute and take control of the economic management team himself. I've noted the recent draft motion of censure by the minority against the Minister of Finance and the recent rebellion of the G95, group of 95 majority members calling for the removal of the minister. I've also noted the statement by the majority leader, I think only yesterday, of a so-called compromise reached that the minister will leave after he has completed the budget and the IMF negotiations. I think this is untenable. Budget preparation and IMF negotiations are the results of teamwork. They are not the work of one individual. I fail to see how the absence of the minister will affect the preparation of the budget and the negotiations with the International Monetary Fund. There surely must be persons with the requisite experience in the MPP to carry on this work. After all, what happened to the mantra, we have the men? For us in the NDC, our position on debt restructuring is that any debt restructuring must not put the absolute burden on only domestic creditors. Restructuring of our debts must cover both domestic and external debts. I note that the MPP wants to do only domestic because they want to be able to quickly go back onto the international credit market. Ghanaians in the last few years have suffered severe erosion of indigenous capital. The banking sector clean-out led to the loss of jobs and erosion of capital and savings of many Ghanaian families and businesses. Any debt restructuring restricted to cover only domestic debt would lead to a further erosion of local savings and capital, and would also severely weaken the Ghanaian banking system. Building the Ghana we want. 1, reducing public debt service obligations and creating fiscal space. The biggest problem with our economy today is the huge size of our public debt, as Dr. Atofosin told us, which is estimated to be something in the region of 522 billion by the close of the year 2022. This must be immediately tackled and stopped from growing further. And so to achieve this, these are some of our suggestions. There must be an immediate moratorium placed on all non-concessional borrowing. Again, government must actively canvass our bilateral partners for more concessional financing and grants. Again, there must be a stop to central bank financing of government above the allowed 5% threshold. The current printing of money by the central bank to finance government's deficit is further fueling inflation, because the bank is printing money and using it to finance government's deficit. Governments must stop collateralizing statutory funds for the purpose of taking more loans. The wanton collateralization of these funds has been very unhelpful. It has limited the financial space of the statutory funds such as Get Fund and the District Assembly's Common Fund. Government should desecuritize these funds and add them onto the public debt as part of the discussions on debt restructuring. We estimate that if the proceeds due ESLA, Get Fund, the Road Fund, etc., are freed of the burden of collateralization and the independent power producer payments are renegotiated, government would have access to a total of about 16 billion in 2023, 17.6 billion in 2024, and 19.4 billion extra fiscal space in 2025 from these funds alone. This would significantly ease the cash crunch, which has crippled many sectors, resulting in government's inability to meet such basic obligations as supplying food to secondary schools and providing textbooks for basic schools. Expenditure items for consideration is what I spoke about in terms of removing the collateralization of the funds. And so if government does this, it will make, additional financing available. Ladies and gentlemen, we will make further suggestions. There are many other suggestions that we will have to give government, and we're doing this in order that they can use it to improve our current situation. We also recommend that legislation should be passed to prevent any future collateralization of statutory funds. We should make Parliament regulate the issue of collateralization of funds so that no future government is able to do that. Again, government should also begin work to amend the enabling legislations of state-owned enterprises like the Ghana Cocoa Board to prohibit them from engaging in non-core quasi-fiscal functions. Cocoa Board is currently, as Dr. Atofosin said, reeling under a debt of about 14 billion Ghana cedis, from a situation of about 1.5 billion cedis in 2016. Currently, Cocoa Board owes in cocoa bills alone almost 14 billion Ghana cedis. And this has made Cocoa Board severely distressed and is putting additional strength on government finances. No wonder, and this is an aside, no wonder cocoa farmers are not getting the incentives they should get. Their prices for their products are not being increased in a timely manner. And so it's becoming unprofitable to continue to maintain their farms. And so they are selling the farms to Galamsey operators. The astronomical debt has crippled Cocoa Board and made it impossible for them to pay bills due to license buying companies and their suppliers. And so today, farmers are selling their cocoa to license buying agencies, and they don't have the money to pay the farmers for the cocoa. This debt overhang has affected the produce buying company, which is currently unable to pay the salaries of its workers. Indeed, similar liabilities within other state-owned enterprises amount to a staggering almost 30 billion Ghana cedis, and is impacting the entire public debt. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest sources of suffering and difficulty for Ghanaians today is the cost of fuel, which has skyrocketed to the highest levels in our history due to the rapidly falling cedi and its effect on everything else on the market. Something needs to be done. Ghana is making huge windfall from the sale of crude oil, royalties, taxes, payments, surface rentals, and others. Section 41 of the 2022 semi-annual PIAC report confirms that an amount of $731 million was realized from Ghana's oil resources in the first half of 2022 alone. And as an aside, while petroleum prices are increasing because we're importing finished products, we are having an increased revenue from oil because the prices on the international market have gone up. Unfortunately, we cannot leverage it because our production has fallen. I'll come back to that later. So this amount of over 700 million is equivalent to about 8.7 billion Ghana cedis and surpasses the total projected petroleum revenues expected for the whole of the 2022 financial year, which was estimated about some 6.6 billion cedis. So we've achieved more revenue from our oil sector than we anticipated in the budget. And if you check the budget statement, that's on paragraph 253 of the 2022 budget statement, presented in Parliament in November last year. The government can therefore apply some of this huge windfall that is being received from the increase in oil prices to cushion the other side of the equation in terms of price of petroleum products, in order that we can cushion consumers. And in addition, other revenue handles have witnessed significant positive outturns. Let me give, for instance, another example. The 2022 fiscal data report from the Ministry of Finance reveals that for the first 2 quarters of the year, the Price Stabilization and Recovery Levy, that is the PSRL alone, has accrued over 708 million as compared to the projected target of 269.3 million, which is almost 200% above the revenue target. The government can therefore apply this Price Stabilization Recovery Levy to the intended purpose of cushioning the price of petroleum products at this time. Cutting costs, reducing waste, and spending wisely. One other major problem that has brought us to this point is the reckless and frivolous spending of our scarce natural resources. A fundamental principle in economic management is fiscal discipline in times of crisis. It is simply not possible to live beyond our means and avoid the kind of economic turnout that we currently find ourselves in today. Rampant over-expenditure is reflected in the extraordinary large budget deficits of the last 2 years, which is set to persist for a 3rd straight year if urgent cost-cutting measures are not taken. As noted again by Dr. Forson in his presentation, government will have to cut expenditure by up to 4% of GDP to create the fiscal space desired to get out of this economic crisis. Now note this, the minister in his media budget statement announced a 30% cut in expenditure across board. It appears that this cut is not working, as government expenditure in the first half of the year appears to have significantly exceeded the budget. The minister, rather than a vague reference to percentage cuts, must be specific in what areas these expenditures are to be cut. This will give a clearer picture of the expenditure reduction and how much will be saved from that directive. Drastic action must therefore be taken to reverse the cycle and bring public expenditure within acceptable and prudent levels. Let me propose some measures on how governments can cut costs. One is the size of government. A big contributor to the excessive public expenditure is the sheer size of government. President Akufo-Addo has been particularly irresponsible in keeping a needlessly large government. At a point, we had over 120 ministers in his government, with hundreds of political appointees at the presidency and others attached to ministers and other state organizations. While the president has currently cut down this number, the number of ministers has reduced in his second term, there's still room for a further reduction, including merging some ministries to reduce expenditure and cut down the ministers in government to a figure below 65. It's also necessary to trim the large number of political appointees who have sought refuge in the Flagstaff House. This will reflect the necessities of the time and the need for modesty and prudence. Secretariats and agencies. There are also too many agencies created overnight by this government without any functional necessity that need to be scrapped or merged for efficiency to ensure savings to the public purse. For instance, we have a free SHS secretariat. Meanwhile, the Ghana Education Service has adequate capacity to handle the implementation of the free SHS policy without the wasteful existence of another secretariat. Again, why create and staff a one district, one factory secretariat with new project vehicles and other cost items when the Ministry of Trade and Industry has an industrial development unit that is well placed to enhance the industrialization policy of government? The National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, the National Employment Agency, MASLOC, Ghana Enterprise Agency, and the many other agencies could be merged into one entity under the Ministry of Labor, Employment and Labor Relations. Because they all have similar overlapping functions, which the ministry is mandated to undertake. The so-called Special Development Initiative Secretariat and the accompanying development authorities, Coastal Development Authority, Middle Belt Development Authority, Northern Development Authority, all these must be scrapped, and their supposed functions should be sent back to the Ministry of Local Government and the Metropolitan and District Assemblies. And be sent back to the Metropolitan and District Assemblies, whose work they have usurped only for sloganeering purposes. Local level infrastructure, development of local level infrastructure has always been under the purview of district assemblies. All that is required is the timely release of their common fund and any other additional resources that they will be well placed to undertake their responsibilities effectively. The functionaries are already in the districts. They already know their functions, which includes taking care of poor people and persons with disability. Mr. President, just give them their funds to develop our communities. The MMDAs are by far better custodians of local economic development than the development authorities. Let us empower them. The next place to cut is Office of the President. The budget of the Office of the President has ballooned over the last 6 years from a little over 700 million Ghana cedis to 3.1 billion Ghana cedis in 2022. For expenditure rationalization to be successful, it must start first with the President's office. I believe that substantial savings of more than 1 billion cedis can be made by slashing the budget of the Office of Government Machinery. And certainly, the use of chartered aircrafts for presidential travel must be one of the first items to cut. Checking waste and corruption. We need to introduce stricter public financial management guidelines and regulations. A tougher sanctions regime must be introduced to check the hemorrhaging of about 17 billion Ghana cedis every year, as contained in the Auditor General's report. This must be vigorously enforced to curtail the appalling waste and corruption that the Auditor General unearths every year. Everything must be done to win the fight against corruption. It is quite clear that government has lost its will in this fight. It is a notorious fact that corruption appears to be defeating the government of Nana Akufo-Addo. Indeed, it is fair to say that there really has been no real fight put up against corruption under the Akufo-Addo administration. The graft and misapplication of public funds by government appointees calls for radical action and not shielding of these perpetrators, as we have sadly witnessed in the last few years. The next is suspension of non-essential projects. All non-essential projects, such as the 116 million euro new Accra International Conference Center and the construction of new embassy buildings for new missions abroad, must be suspended for now. The public funding of the National Cathedral funding of the National Cathedral, particularly at this time, must stop. Being a Christian myself and deeply appreciative of the centrality of God in national affairs, I agree with most Ghanaians who believe that the project cannot constitute a top priority of government at this time, warranting further injection of scarce public funds. If it must be built, it must be built with private funds. Because of the non-transparency of the processes of procurement associated with the National Cathedral project, I believe that the project should be subjected to a value for money audit in order to open the way for believers who wish to contribute to its construction to do so. Because the estimated $400 million needed for a project like this is gargantuan. And for those who wish to contribute to it, they must be given the assurance through a value for money audit that every CD that they put into this project is worth putting in the project. And this for MPs. Similarly, the proposed building of constituency MPs, offices for MPs should be shelved for now until the economy is out of the woods. I suggest that in the interim, office space can be found within the district assembly offices or other government buildings for the purpose of MPs' offices for the meantime, until the economy can support, separate offices, decent offices for them. In our current economic state, public funds must go into projects that are necessary and which meet the pressing needs of our people in our communities. Such projects must have tangible and measurable impact on job creation and national development. If it's not too late, we can pull out of hosting the All-African Games. If it's not too late, as it would severely stretch our already precarious finances by hundreds of millions of cedis. Public procurement. There must be a greater transparency in public procurement. As a result, value for money audits and assessments must be made of all projects procured by sole sourcing or restrictive tendering. We should institute a strict and irrevocable precondition for government and parliamentary approval of all public contracts and transactions above an agreed value. Stabilizing the currency, cutting the import bill, and job creation. My brothers and sisters, the above remedies represent some of the short to medium term proposals for government to mitigate the imminent collapse of our Ghanaian economy. There's, however, the need for broad, long-term economic governance and structural reforms that will guarantee sustained socio-economic growth for our country and help us avoid some of the mistakes that have led us to this perilous point. Our governance structure and institutions are in urgent need of reforms to make them more responsive and in tune with the aspirations and hopes of the Ghanaian people. We have known for decades that the economic model and structure we operate cannot deliver the needed development, and certainly not at the pace that we desire. We do not stand a credible chance among the Committee of Nations if there are no fundamental shifts in our economic structure, which has remained a raw material producing and heavily import dependent country. Revisit Operation Feed Yourself. General Achampong, despite the depraved corruption that swallowed him up in later years, was off to a good start in the early part of his regime. The Operation Feed Yourself and Operation Feed Your Industries programs yielded massive results during the period from 1972 through to 1976. Another student of Nkrumah and an ardent supporter of General Achampong was a man called Daniel Augustus Lati, simply known as Dan Lati, of blessed memory. He formed the GCPP in his attempt to run for president. The central plank of the economic policy of his party, GCPP, was domestication. He was unable to articulate the vision as eloquently as one would have wished. But the chickens have come home to roost. And today we are faced with the effects of neglect of the diagnosis that was made years ago about the structure of our economy. We do enormous damage to our currency, the cedi, and our economy when we spend billions of dollars on the importation of rice, sugar, tomato products, frozen fish, poultry, meat products, and vegetable cooking oils. And yet we have the potential, more than the potential, to produce many of these products here ourselves and even export. It is estimated that foreign exchange outlay for importation of food products for which we have a comparative advantage to produce locally amounts to some $3 billion every year. Every year we spend over almost $3 billion importing the things that we can produce: rice, chicken, oil, tomato, fish. It is said that out of adversity comes opportunity. Restriction of importation of some of these products, side by side with increased local production, is a realistic proposition that we need to begin to consider at this time. There must be prioritization and strategic investment in private, large-scale commercial production of these commodities that I have mentioned. We cannot sustain progress in agricultural production based only on the support of small-scale producers. Government must support large-scale commercial agricultural production to achieve food self-sufficiency and to cut down our huge food import bill. We must look at the entire value from production to processing to marketing. Also leveraging the petroleum and energy sector. It is not beyond us to do this, as we demonstrated a few years ago when we built a gas processing plant at Ituabu. The construction of the Ituabu gas processing plant has led to a 61% reduction in the importation of light crude oil, which we were using to fire our thermal plants. And it has resulted in an annual savings of about $300 million every year. The plant also supplies about 50% of the nation's LPG needs. The cooking gas that you use, 50% is produced by the Ituabu plant. So this combined, the LPG production and the production of gas, leading to a stoppage of importation of almost $300 million, has helped to reduce our forex outlay. Can you imagine if we had to spend 300 million this year, in addition to the current problems we're facing with our foreign exchange? Thanks to the vision of President Atta Mills of blessed memory, we would have been in a far worse situation at this time if this plant had not been built. We must expand the capacity of the Ghana National Gas Company to extend its distribution pipelines. As a matter of urgency, there's the need to revamp the Tema Oil Refinery and ensure that the refinery processes our domestic crude oil, as we started to do under my administration. Before we left office, we delivered the first consignment of locally produced Ghanaian crude to the Tema Oil Refinery for refining. This will not only help prevent fuel shortages, but will also reduce the demand for foreign exchange cover to import finished products. Significantly, it will reduce it. Currently, about $400 million is required every month to import finished petroleum products. Another sector we can develop to rake in much needed foreign exchange is the power sector. With the completion of the 330 kV Kumasi-Bolgatanga line, which began in March 2016 under my administration, the country is poised to export additional power to the Sahelian regions. We are accused of overproducing power, more than we needed. But we had a plan. We're building a line that would evacuate that power to supply Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. I would encourage the government to work urgently to deploy the Ameri and other plants to enable the nation to export more power for the more needed foreign exchange revenue. It is regrettable that in the last 6 years, government has been unable to bring any new oil or gas prospect into production. For the last 6 years, not one single oil well has come into production. This administration benefited from the additional revenues produced by the 10 and Sankofa fields, which were fields that were fast-tracked by the NDC administration under my presidency. Unfortunately, under this president, we have seen ExxonMobil exit our oil industry. We have also seen a stalling of work on the popular Aka field. Unnecessary litigation has stalled bringing on stream extra oil and gas from the ENI prospects and has led, as I speak, to the withdrawal of all trade to Cote d'Ivoire. The President must take direct interest in reversing these unfortunate developments in the oil and gas sector, because that sector has the potential to bring in additional foreign revenue, foreign exchange. This sector has the potential to rake in additional revenues, especially now when, as a result of global circumstances, the price of these petroleum products, oil and gas, have gone upwards significantly. Governments must build on the experience and leverage the comparative edge we have as a peaceful country with highly skilled human resources to make Ghana a major hub for energy exports. Considering the wide expectation of an energy crisis in West Africa in the near future, a strategic partnership with the private sector can rake in much needed forex through export of energy. This new and additional forex will offer the Bank of Ghana critical reserves and can also finance the manufacturing sector for further job creation. We must do whatever it takes to add value to our exports through primary, secondary, and tertiary processing. We must add value to our cocoa by increasing domestic cocoa processing, refining our gold before export, and pursuing the dream of an integrated bauxite and aluminium industry. Valco and many other strategic industries that can serve as extra pillars of our economy must be brought on stream. In the last NDC administration, we made modest efforts towards extending assistance to local investors for increased production of poultry, rice, tomato, cooking oil, and pharmaceuticals. We constructed a new sugar processing plant at Comenda in the central region and began discussions with another private sector investor about the establishment of another sugar processing plant in Savlugu in the northern region. We encouraged the produce buying company to build a share processing plant at Buipe, which created many direct and indirect jobs. Unfortunately, as I speak, this factory has been mismanaged and is currently shut down. We procured a strategic partner to partner with Cocoa Board to establish a jute sack production facility here in Ghana. The project was meant to eliminate our importation of jute sacks, produce enough sacks for use by Cocoa Board and for exports to the landlocked countries. Unfortunately, projects like that have also stalled since the advent of the Akufo-Addo administration. A resurrection of all these projects and ideas will not only create jobs for our young people and other able Ghanaians, but it will in the medium term help Ghana attain and consolidate our status as a middle-income country. We must plug the loopholes in our gold export industry to reap better returns from the extractive activity that is causing so much destruction to our environment. It is trite knowledge that the figures we capture in respect of our gold exports are far lower than the quantity of the gold metal that leaves our shores every year. Better accountability in the gold sector can yield hundreds of millions of dollars more for the national kitty. Now, you the citizens, what can we do as citizens to help this situation? It is said that desperate times call for desperate measures. There is no denying that we are in desperate times. While responsibility for the difficulties we face lies squarely with the Nana Addo Bawumia administration, there are things that we too can do as citizens in our own small way to minimize the suffering we're going through and help government turn the situation around. A good way to start will be to regulate and minimize our expenditure by sticking to only the things we really need. This is trite economic knowledge. We must stick to only the things we really need. We must eliminate ostentation as much as possible. As much as possible, we need to acquire and sustain a taste and preference for locally manufactured products. If we must buy consumables or food products, let us consciously look for that rice or chicken that was produced locally, so that it doesn't become necessary for us to have to spend millions of dollars to import those same items. Thank you. Let us consciously eat more of our local foods, like yam, local grains like maize, rice, our local rice, cassava, beans, gobe. those of you of the Gobe Eaters, the Gobe Eaters Association, you are doing very well for Ghana. Because you are saving Ghana very important critical foreign exchange. Aside from the sugar, those who are also eating the Cocoa Eaters Association, Koshe and Cocoa, apart from the sugar, you are also doing Ghana a good service. This way, we reduce demand for foreign currency and we reduce the pressure on our currency and boost domestic production to create a win-win situation. We should cut down on non-essential foreign travel and cut down on foreign and domestic travel, and also cut down expensive foreign products that we purchase for our homes. If there ever was a time for us to be thrifty, this is it. Because even after an IMF program has been agreed, the austerity of the next few years is going to be very severe, as Dr. Forsen rightly said. We save scarce family resources. We must save scarce family resources and use them only for the most priority expenditure. I was touched by the news that one of the biggest manufacturing companies in Ghana had extended a one-off cost of living payment to employees to ease their suffering. And I know that there are many other companies willing to do this, but they are afraid that they will be taxed, for that extra outlay. This is a humanitarian gesture I would encourage many more companies to emulate, because the suffering is real and intense. I'd also propose that, just as happened during the COVID-19 initiative, when businesses that had the possibility to give their employers the opportunity to work from home on some days, we must look at this again as a possibility, because it will prevent them from having to drive or spend money on transport to go to work. So these are all suggestions that we can consider. There are many things that we can do to claw back control of our economy and resolve the cyclical busts and booms we have suffered all these decades. The NDC 2020 manifesto contained many of such bold proposals that can move our country forward. These include the Big Push infrastructural plan, whose major plank was for the implementation of critical and relevant self-financing national economic infrastructure to facilitate our rapid socio-economic development. Currently, with the imminent IMF program, aspects of this program where priority was given to self-financing projects will be relevant in our present circumstances. Also, a well-labeled, tabled, and widely agreed consultation can approve a 10-year priority investment program. The Atuabu gas plant and the Kotoka International Airport Terminal 3 projects are examples of this model of self-financing infrastructural projects. They are yielding benefits for our nation even as we speak, and they are generating revenue and paying for themselves. These policy proposals remain as relevant today as they were at the time that they were formulated in 2020. And this government is free to adopt some of these measures as and when they please, as we have outlined tonight to save our country. In building the Ghana we want, we must all put our shoulders to the wheel. We in the NDC value the mandate that is bestowed on us periodically to govern this country, and we do not intend to ever abuse it whenever we're given the privilege by Ghanaians to form any future government. In the interim, we'll continue to play our role as a viable and responsible opposition party that keeps government in check and holds them accountable to the people. It is in that spirit that we have outlined the above measures to help resolve the economic mess we are in and bring some respite to the good people of Ghana. We are in a crisis, and this is not a time for arrogant and insulting posturing. This is a time for listening. It's a time for utmost humility. And it's a time for honest contemplation. It is time to admit and accept where we have gone wrong. It is time to bring our suffering people together, to unite our people. It's a time to promote unity and seal the cracks. It's a time to demonstrate leadership and sacrifice. I mean genuine sacrifice in the interest of our people, in the interest of our country and our children's future. The scripture tells us that although we may fall, we can rise again. It is, however, imperative that government accepts publicly with a contrite heart that they have gone wrong and earnestly seek workable solutions from everybody without regards to partisanship or ethnicity. Our very lives as people are at stake. We must boldly, even if for the first time, discard the arrogance of power and don the cloak of humility and come together to confront our reality and face our truth, accept our faults, and act in unison. We must not throw up our hands in despair, no matter how uncomfortable we may feel about confronting the truth. We owe it a duty to our people to look at what brought us to this point. To the people of Ghana, I say the NDC and I fully understand and appreciate how serious today's situation is. This is because we are part of the Ghanaian community. We live together, we feel the suffering together. We know mothers and fathers are worried about the future of their children. Families with mortgages are deeply troubled and contemplating the future of their children's, their homes and their children's education. Just as families who must pay rents in due course are wondering where the next rent advance is going to come through. We know farmers and elders of our community are struggling to survive. We know businessmen and women are mostly running at a loss, with only a few barely able to make ends meet. But let me assure you, you are not alone, and you will never be alone. Together we can save Ghana and build the Ghana we want. Regardless of how bad the situation is right now, I still have hope that we can turn things around. Wholeheartedly, I believe in the resilience of our people and the lengths we can go to secure a prosperous future for our families. I've had the privilege to work with some of the most brilliant Ghanaians, and I've personally seen how dedicated they are to our country and its future. My brothers and sisters, throughout our history, Ghana's darkest days have always been followed by its finest hours. We always mobilize when all hope seems lost. We always come together when nobody gives us a chance. We always turn things around for the better, regardless of how grave the situation is. The fighting spirit that we all share as Ghanaians will never leave us, despite the numerous attempts employed by many to break it. This is our land. This is our destiny. We're ready to move mountains to protect and build the Ghana that we want. Let us rise. Let us hold each other's hands. Let us put our shoulders and minds to the wheel. Let us protect and defend our democracy. And let us build the Ghana we want. As I conclude, let me state, and I agree with the President, and wish to add my voice to his call on our armed forces and security services to remain loyal to the states and the Constitution. The current economic circumstances, though dire, do not give excuse for any acts that are unconstitutional. Working together as one people and using the levers of our Ghanaian constitution, we can turn the situation around. I thank you for your kind attention, and may God bless our homeland, Ghana. Thank you.
Wow. And I want to say wow again. How many of you feel like crying? Can I get you some tissues? That was very emotional, Mr. President. Thank you very much. You never disappoint us. Anytime you have the microphone, what you do is that you calm us down. And that's exactly what you have done this evening, His Excellency. We are very grateful. Can we get another standing ovation for His Excellency John Dramani Mahama? Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Indeed, His Excellency, you have saved the incompetent NPP team. I'm sure they've taken notes. I hope they will come with something better on Sunday. They have been taking notes, and I hope that those notes were well taken. Mr. Standobe, please let the speech go out immediately. They need it. They really, really need it so that they can start working on their notes for Sunday. I may not be able to appropriately thank all of you, those present here, and the millions watching and listening around the world. So permit me to please invite a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Professional Studies, Accra, and the 2020 Campaign Manager for the NDC, Professor Joshua Alabi, to give us a vote of thanks.
His Excellency, after Honorable Atu Forson's presentation, I nearly collapsed. By your delivery, in fact, I got a text message from someone that yes, we have a leader. Honorable Atu Forson said there will be haircut. And I'm a pensioner. At the end of the month, I receive X amount, the beginning of the year, and that could buy Y number of gallons. Today, the same X amount, I'm buying Y divided by 2. and you are telling me another haircut. But I decided to remove myself from this because my hair is different. So I may not receive any cut. But it's very serious. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, friends of the media, it is my privilege to have been given the opportunity to give the vote of thanks. The vote of thanks in this very auditorium for the University of Professional Studies. A very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the good people of Ghana and the NDC, I am glad to be standing here to express my vote of thanks. A special thanks to our former president and his wife for this excellent delivery. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, you have inspired us. You have told Ghanaians what you have done under this circumstance. You have also given us hope and assurance, especially after Honorable Atufosin's delivery. Thank you very much. You are a true leader. You are the people's leader. Our honorable members of parliament, led by Honorable Hanan Rijusu, and my good friend Honorable Butaka, I know you kept in a lot for this program. We thank you for your continued support for the party. We also thank you. We also thank you for the good work you are doing in Parliament. The good people of Ghana appreciate your good work and will continue to count on you to keep the government in check. We sincerely thank you for this. We thank the party executives for their leadership. Members of the diplomatic corps here present and the traditional leaders, we also thank you for your presence. We thank the media, and as usual, trust that you will take our message across for the good people of Ghana and the protection of our country. We need you. Thanks to everyone here present for their time to be here and for listening to the NDC and His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the hope for this country. For the media again, we hope you will work with us and help the people of Ghana to really appreciate the program. And when the time comes, to know exactly what they'll do. Finally, we thank the Almighty God for giving us today. I thank myself too. Chebeke nyeme woda mo fia moshi. Nyeme yi ka nyeme yi. Nene wonu wie mo. Ni nini wo ko nyeji. Womba. Womba. Ndi wo baba. Ne twa no manyaba. Thank you everybody.
Dramani Mahama na uhunu se sabre opani alabi na uhunu se wabetena se a odas no but jonwa ebo no na uhunu se members no sasa no enti the campaign song no na womo ebo a uhunu se asa ekoso gidi Safin wa joining ya UPS auditorium aha omampani dada John Dramani Mahama ebekasa ye efa Ghana economy no eho na enumu ensem a wode etu dwa no na owie ye party for no former ministers and MPs womo ewo auditorium ha womo ashase a womo esa ebu omumu je sa. All right, I say, and I want to say,
I want to thank the minority group in Parliament and for their effort and everything that they did in putting together this program, funding it, and calling it Building the Ghana We Want. They did this in collaboration with the Communications Department headed by Sami Jamefi and the Office of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. We want to thank our minority MPs. We want to say thank you to Mr. Sami Jamefi. We want to thank Standobe, Joyce Power, Felix Ofosukwache, Dr. Omane Buama, Julius Debra, former Chief of Staff, Callistus Mahama, and Dr. Valerie Sawyer. We also want to say thank you to our national executives and everybody here present and watching us across the globe. Thank you to all our media partners for the live coverage and to all my colleagues who are here with us to cover the forum. We are very grateful. We couldn't have done this without you. We'll take the closing prayer from the Minority Chief Whip, Honorable Muntaka, then I will be back.
Let's be in the prayer mode. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our country really needs our prayers. The time to pray is now. Oh God, we thank you for your mercy. We thank you for all you've done for us. Ya Allah, we thank you for bringing all of us here. Today we've had a lot of challenges ahead of us. It is our prayer, Ya Allah, you intercede on our behalf and ease our suffering. Ya Allah, we pray that you ease our struggle. Give all of us the understanding, the wisdom to be able to carry our country out of this difficulty. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا كما أمرته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تؤملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Muntaka is MP for Asawase and he's the Minority Chief Whip. Thank you very much, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama and your beautiful wife, Mrs. Lordina Mahama. We are grateful for your time. I leave you with a quote from Herbert Hoover. He says, "Blessed are the young, but they shall inherit the national debt. So if you are a young man here, know that whatever is happening, you will come and inherit the debt. My name is Obobia Dakopoku. Thank you for your time and have a good evening.
All right, enti sabre yemfa se dwumadi no aba awiya enesa efri ochina ekono ena ensem a omampani dada ede etu dwa no yebesha ase na yebobo ho edi ho enkomo. We know say aban so ene na so afo ne mpanimfo ewo nhyiamu a wo mo ehwe se wo betumi adwendwen wo man yensikasem ene hawa yeah, famuno emu and also an address beba on Sunday and into Edru Kasida and Yebehuno Yebepi Aba Ewo that address no emu and Sabre who say the Jumedi no Aba every year yes probably bedding Komo Bako Yenubi Nafe Yede ye live broadcaster Yede Ebra or no Ade Aba every year. But just a quick run through no Omampani agetumo se ye wo how na the redly ye kai ene se usu se ebe ya asoafo dodo a ewo aban mu no onhwe na onte so eno achi no ohunu se ministries bebre no a ewo ho a eho hia ye nkeka bi emom sabre ya sika eni ho no na afi ye ntimi enya sika emfamu oman no eno achi agencies bebre eno so hunu se eno so ho hia ene bi mo ho assemblies adwuma ya sheda create agencies bi e de ahyehyɛ wo mo nsa eno so hunu ne se enya de a eboa enti onya ya anka ne nyina no yeyi e de afiri nanka ama bibia atumi aba form efa yensikasem eho otusu kra senka ache na senka omampani John omampani ye nana adodanko akufado aba address Ghana for dada ama nkrahye sem bi aba then so no what say afei na omampani aye say weekend or this address na ebeba ani nyina mu o hwese ensem be free mu no betumi ama abotoyemu aba na Ghana for akoma atowo mo ayem at the same time no osusu se asoja for said the omampani edito wo mo ani mo se nokre omamu ayehye omamu ayeden eninti obia ema bibia emra form no ono nso ede na no ebetumo bi na wasre asoja for se wasre wo mo a ma obia entake advantage se the ekoso imu no enkonko ba ne se basabasa ye bia betweniti ewo ba bia enenti eno ene adesede a omampani dada John Dramani Mahama edituja eno ena wo hwe a okan ya dom kuma no sorry ejina ye na fe wo mo ensem ede emano no ti sabre de apa awieye yadu no akwakoye enchia eno ena ekoso personally minim genti as such presentations ya na yenye ewo fikasemo. That is my personal observation, because I believe senka and someone eba ye na bebre no aba ye ewo fikasemo it would have sunk well. Anyway, that is my personal observation. Give me hunu ya my gain extra me efa ho eno no. But the free watching economy you say radio stations no be wubu mo ede aba form bia ate the omampani dada ekan ye abra ye twen say kwasi da omampani ede address ebeba na Ghana for ehunu anamo a one na so afọ ene mpanimfo ekwa asetena no ye wo mo ebeye afa oman emudin a aye no Alright, ebusia for na live coverage de April wono ye de nyina eba awie ye nyame ya adoma watchna ye besan abwakwamu ebio with yet another program ya hihye de amao watchna na megire sesa nkomo yi ebe sha sie ehuri ebe huru watchna na in fact yes watchna. And then probably news file near other programs that far during the weekend, and sana kwasieda omampani dia no eba na me no aka bomo ajoin Monday na discussions no etumi akoso. And on this note, yado besia na yada wase thanks for watching yada say and so sawo share our YouTuber. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button. Na click on the notification bell no so account or share our Facebook on so like a page no say by anytime about live no ube to me ajene na we to me ashare on behalf of the team yadu besia yakra
nuanom sɛ mo pasa mo transfer pomudin mu pa na yare ahoro bi enam aduane bi a yedie so emie nya no wo pasa wonye bia e de na wo bese sɛ wodidi mu kakra na ne yenim da ya de bi te sɛ diabetes cancer high blood pressure cholesterol ene kase mmoroso de keka ho ni nyina no sɛ yetimi nya firi nuane bi mu te sɛ banku fufuo dɔkono ampesie ene de keka ho no enti na ase pa enkoma True Green Foods ya wode ho akɔbɔ Green Health Pharmacy ene functional medicine center ho sɛ wodi nuane bi a carbohydrates no eye low ya very healthy na de biokra sɛ wo diabetes yo uni bio wodi a uni problem me musa kyerɛ efese wodi True Green Foods for nuane no wo experience
ma pomudin na sipi me sugar na ehuri koso tete na
I told you
ma medi fufuo benku dokono tuzafi eba ene amala omunuane na meka se wo ka enche sma na be
Dosi mixed fry, Alka mixed fry, Fufu mixed fry, Yummy mixed fry, Kajma porridge, Alta oat, Better oat, Clean oat, and the baking mixed fry. True Green Foods so there. Start to send me anymore. O council sima na ben.
Hello, love.
Gary, do you have Mommy's parcel for her big day?
The shipping company says it will take 1 month.
A month? Ah, Gary, use Rapid.
Rapid?
Rapid courier ships from the United States to Ghana and 9 other African countries within 3 to 5 days. Log on to rapidgroup.com, buy, ship to us, and we deliver right to your doorstep.
That fast? Yes, that's Rapid for you. Can you sign this?
I thought you only ordered Mommy's parcel.
No, I ordered a few car parts too.
Are you too busy to shop? We will shop for you. Rapid also has a luggage delivery service, so you can make that extra luggage and we will deliver at the lowest rate. Locate Rapid Courier on the Spinters Road off the Lekma Road.
Rapid Courier. Just shop. We deliver. Enjoy.
Malata African market and I'm Papa African market. Odofo so wo bronze ha na wo pe African market papa didwa mo akoma to yam dia Malata African market edam sronko smoked fish meat dry fish so wo pe kenke rice yam fufu flour ni nuane ahodo afiri Africa afei ye want to papa bo wire kente adamma se kente ahwene ahodo ene nioma bebre na wo benya wo Malata African market hwehwe ye chi akwan ene number e wo screen so Malata African market mu King Kong Malata African market and I'm Papa African market Malata African market.
At Diaspora Insurance, we understand the importance of dignified send-offs within Ghanaian culture and traditions. We also understand that you want to avoid the double trauma of your family grieving and not having the financial support to cover funeral expenses when you're not around. With our Diaspora Funeral Cash Plan, you can now cover yourself or your family in Ghana or abroad. With no medicals required, we'll accept you if you are under 75 years. Visit our website today or call us to complete a simple form in under 5 minutes. With Diaspora Insurance, your peace of mind is guaranteed.
Are you a Ghanaian living abroad and are you having problems running errands in Ghana? Don't worry anymore. Sumafo is a mobile app that enables you to run errands in Ghana in a safe, affordable, and fast way. Our services are caring and assistance services. We'll visit your elderly relatives and connect them to needed health care. Errand services will buy and send groceries, birthday cakes, supplies to homes, offices, and schools. Confirmation services will provide third-party confirmation video for contractors' work, and personal representation services will represent you at functions such as funerals and marriages. Download the Sumafo app on Google and iOS stores and enjoy the convenience of running errands in Ghana at your fingertips. Sumafo, send your love home.
Introducing Ionic Digital Smart Locking System. This groundbreaking innovation uses facial recognition and fingerprint scanning technology to provide a safe and secure smart locking system. The ultra-modern design and quality manufacturing of Ionic Digital Smart Locks is perfect for residential homes, hotels, corporate offices, estate developments, and much, much more. Contact Ionic Digital now and upgrade your security the smart way. Contact us on WhatsApp at 050-72